Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Dominion Energy Jazz Cafe, our virtual series of life and song from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. You're joining me again for another chat from the Little Red Couch. Our guest tonight, I am so excited. If I could had time to tell you all the whole story of how we got to this moment, but we don't got time. But we've got Victor Brooks from the Victor Brooks Show. And you see that smile on his face. I'll make a confession right now. I started to confess on our last video. Accidentally, 100% accidentally, it turned out that everyone appearing in this first season of the virtual Jazz Cafe are either family or very dear to my heart. And so last week we met Jeremy Winston, my cousin. And so we're meeting Victor Brooks tonight, another one of my cousins, very accomplished musician, world traveler, world leader. I mean, taking the world by storm with your message of positivity. So before we get into our discussion, would you tell us a little bit more about yourself and a little bit more about this positivity posse that you've got in the world?
Hey, man, I'm so glad to be with you. So glad to be with you, man. And congratulations on all you're doing there at the museum. I mean, Richmond is one of my favorite places ever. It really is. Ever since I was like junior high school, I used to come visit the family and there, man, and just so many great memories of Richmond, Virginia. Concerts at Bird Park.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the jazz. Yeah, back in the 80s, we used to go down there, man, and me and Sean and Allison and then Shako Slip, Shako Bottom. Oh, just great memories, man.
These days, a lot of great music that just, I mean, there's always been great music in Shako, but some really cool live virtual things coming out of that area right now. Hope to tap into some of that talent real soon.
Yeah. And you know, you mentioned we just need so much positivity now with all this going on out here, man, you know, in the world. And, you know, we just decided to take a pause away. Myself, my brother Chris, sister Julie, and our other, we call her our baby niece, not by blood, but relation, Wendy Vaughn.
Yes.
And we just said, you know what, let's just get away and start promoting positivity through the arts, you know, because through music history, man, just all through life history itself, the arts has played such an important role of, you know, of getting us through, whether it was a civil rights movement or Renaissance period or whatever, man. I even heard they were doing music during the Black Plague to get everybody through. So,
yes,
you know, it's art, man. So that's what Positivity Posse is all about. That's it.
We're talking a lot in this series, to your point about the artist's responsibility to capture and archive moments of time and moments of history, and we're certainly in one of those now.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
You know, we're continuing our walk down the journey of jazz, down the path of this art form that comes out of Black America. And today's discussion, I really wanted to focus on unpacking the impact and the story of what the race record is and how the race record becomes R&B in 1946. But what sort of insight can you share with us, Vic, through your own personal experience or your conversations with these great musicians and artists all over the world who certainly had an impact on this art form? What insights can you share with us about what the race record is and how it helps to shape and impact what music has become?
Man, you know, that's, and I'm sorry, I'm right here, as you see, by the water here, but we're also by the airport. But I'm so sorry for any, you know, if you can't hear me, but please, I don't mind repeating. If, you know, this whole thing of race, the race music and crossing over, man, that's a really important, congratulations on even bringing that up, man, because that's a topic that, from talking to a lot of the artists over my life, like Little Richard and my grandfather, Norris Turney, who was with Duke Ellington and Ray Charles, so, you know, back in the day, where they were, even Nina Simone and Nancy Wilson, who I feel blessed to be able to have sat firsthand at their feet, you know, during my life and knowing this industry and this career and hearing the stories of what they all came through and what they learned from their predecessors, you know. But, you know, man, it boiled, I like the way Little Richard said it to me one day. He said, you know what, the bottom line is that Black music is powerful, and especially in the U.S., when we take it all the way back to the history of Black music in the U.S., it started with that boat ride, man, where each drop-off, whether it was the Caribbean, they had their sound, but it started with that rhythm. You know, it dropped off in Latin America, it had their sound, but it had that foundation. And when they dropped us, our forefathers off here in the U.S., we had our own. We created our own, and that gave birth to the spirituals and the work songs, and you know, on up into gospel when we went to church, and all the labels started after that. And then I remember, you know, the conversation being that the power of that, of our music, of that created artistry that was just coming naturally to our people, you know, centuries ago. It became a thing that Little Richard, I remember like going back to him, he said it became a marvel to the other races, because first of all, it didn't feel the same. It wasn't something they could put their finger on. They didn't understand that rhythm. They definitely didn't understand the words and the meaning of a lot of what was, because we were coming out of that place of slavery, out of that place of what's happening to our people. We're in a new land, we're in a new place, and that growth started. So I remember him saying that, you know, the only thing that the industry could do, which is controlled by non-Blacks, whether it was, you know, Italian, it was, you know, the white arena controlled the music industry. And the only thing they could do is say, hey, we can't understand it, but we know it feels different and it feels good. So let's give it a label, you know? And therefore, with the jazz feel that came out of New Orleans, and then the feeling of whatever that jazz feel and message was just started to just take flight, you know? So the best way I can describe it, man, is it was something brand new that just took a wildfire to the United States. And then once it started being cultivated more and distributed more and making records of it and the names put out there, then it started to reach the world, and then the world got a taste of it. So, you know, that's the broader scope of what I remember of these legitimate pioneers, you know, their thing of how it all started with them.
You know, Jeremy said it really well a couple of weeks ago. He made a point that I had put together myself. He talked about how during the time of developing this art form, this jazz music, the radio was also developing, and so too were recordings. And we just had a perfect opportunity to take this sound and record it and distribute it in a way that we hadn't before.
Exactly.
I think about early recordings of George Johnson, Corpus Slave, and we have, of course, very early recordings of his voice. The very earliest recordings of a Black voice that I'm aware of.
Yeah, no, you're right, man. You're right. That's the same thing I heard as well. I'm with you on that.
And then later on, musicians coming up like Louis Armstrong or Billie Holiday, we talked about in our first, or Ethel Waters, other great artists cutting their teeth and finding their way from the stage and from the nightclubs to the recording studios, which brought us these things we called race records for a while.
There you go. That's right.
What else?
And we got to remember that the race record, that label race record, was not started by the Black musician.
Right.
You know, that was just another label that the industry created in order to make it palatable to the world, palatable to the society outside of the Black world, the Afro-American world, because we were doing our own thing. You know, if the real of it is, we were in if it wasn't the songs and music we were creating in the fields while we were working, you know, on the plantation, that was our own message to each other, our own message of encouragement that came in from the boat ride, that the music that kept the slaves alive, those strong people alive who were able to then be able to be on the plantation, you dig, that made it survive that boat ride. The music that they carried from that carried into the plantation. We were into our own life, our own feeling of support through our artistry, through the words of the music, through everything. We were just doing what we do. And once the outside ear got a hold of it, then they said, well, wait a minute, we've got to call this something. To us, it was music. It was what we did. It was who we were. And how it came out, just was a natural thing. So in order, when you get ready to, like with any business venture, you get ready to package something, you got to be able to call it something so that you can put it out there and say, hey, now we have, of course they couldn't call it just music because it wasn't classical. It wasn't, it wasn't a direct European ancestry of music, which is beautiful in its own right. But it was just different. And it was something that they didn't know what to call it. So, hey, let's call it race music. And if, I know that we get down into the history of even that, when the lines were drawn of segregation for so many years, that was like, no, we're not going, the races can't party together. We had our juke joints down on our side of town, but, the other, sorry about that. But the other, the white community was like, no, we're not, you can't come over to our side. But they would definitely be able to come to our juke joints, And once again, I had the precursor that I'm not dogging out. I'm not being a negative racial slant on it, but it's just really real what it was. So when they came to our juke joints and sat down and felt that rhythm and blues, felt that blues felt, and sat in our churches and realized what the move was in those, even in gospel, when all of that gumbo of music started happening, it was like, hey, let's call this something because that's what they're doing on the other side of the tracks. So, hey, the white community over here, this is race music, you guys. This is something that's just another label of something that was going to be palatable to say, hey, this is Black music. And this is what they're doing. This is what our young kids are listening to.
Marketing tool.
Right now.
And at the same time, you've got, famously you have people like Marilyn Monroe doing what she could to open doors, like Ella Fitzgerald. At the same time, there was still struggle, and there were still people working to come together with all this beautiful love and art and positivity that can be created. When we pool our resources. That's right. As they say. I got to say, I love the way you're describing things. Boat ride. I love that. A gumbo of music. I love these.
I guess that's just the Memphis in me.
Memphis. I wonder if you would mind sharing with us some more stories about lessons you've learned from people like Little Richard or Nina Simone or Nancy Wilson. I hadn't thought of Nancy in quite a while, but I'd love to hear some more stories that you've learned about their travels, and Norris as well, as they were bringing up and creating music during this period.
Yeah, man. You know what? The main thing I know that the thread all of them had is the fact of respect for their artistry and respect for art itself, the power of art. Art has, not can, but it has already changed the world. It can change thought. It can change, it can change the negative to a positive. It can make you think about what's going on in your own heart and then kind of put yourself in somebody else's shoes. That's music, that's art. And, the not just musical art, but visual art, photography, dance, everything. And what I learned through them, man, is that number one, as an artist, we have a responsibility to number one, stay true to ourselves. Going back, I remember Nancy Wilson made a beautiful example. She said, you know what, when she was describing her style as a singer, because I remember saying, Nancy, are you a jazz singer? She said, Victor, I'm a singer. She said, I'll let everybody else put the labels on me. She said, but yes, if I'm feeling jazz, then I thank God it's a blessing that she can do jazz. She said, if I'm asked to do R&B, she said, I'll sing R&B, you know? So her biggest thing was staying true to herself as an artist, and realizing that if you're blessed to be able to deliver your art expression in a multiple genre arena, then that's even better. But if it's only one arena that your soul's feeling you in, then eat that up. That's the message I kept getting. Uncle Richard was like, I grew up in church, I sang gospel, yeah, but then I started doing my rhythm and blues. And he was like, rhythm and blues had a baby, they called it rock and roll. He said, so that's okay, that's the label you're doing? He said, okay. So it wasn't really about the label as your artistry, that you can't let the labels dictate your artistic expression. The labels really were there as a way of selecting the buying public of that particular genre. And of course, you know, yeah, there is a power to say jazz music, there is, but once again, I'll keep going back to that's just what these musicians did. That's just who they were, that expression that they stayed true to. Okay, there you have it. Most of the jazz artists that became like Miles and Coltrane, even before them, you mentioned Ethel Waters and the rest, man, they just stayed true to themselves. And that's these old school, that's that old school original artistry that I respect so much, is just staying true to yourself, not worrying about the labels. Oh, but I'm sorry, I didn't, a story to Nancy, what she said was, she said, listen, if we go outside, and she said, you know, and we're standing and looking at a tree, and they ask Picasso to paint that tree, then they ask Gauguin to paint that tree, or Matisse paint that tree, or Ernie Barnes paint the tree. She said, it's going to be the same tree, but you're going to have 3 or 4 different expressions of that tree. She said, that's the magic of artistry. She said, that's what I am. And that did it for me. I was only like maybe, I was like 18 when she said that, and that just put a cherry on the cake for me, man.
I mean, and dig that. That whole sentiment is jazz itself coming out of improvisation, right? You take a theme and you put your own funk on it, as they say, and it becomes your artistry. And that's jazz. I think I talk to a lot of people these days about music, or sometimes I'll do a show, and every so often somebody will come to me and say something like, well, you know, I love Had a Good Night, but that wasn't really jazz. I realize that wasn't really jazz. Right. And I always let them say what they got to say. They have their own piece. There's no reason to get into an argument about it, but I always want to say, you know, it's jazz to them. Yeah. That's not your jazz, but it is theirs.
Come on, man.
No reason to start to funk with somebody, but that's always how I take it. All right, cool.
I got you.
Let that man sing the way he sings.
I got you, man.
That's
you get.
What were you saying, man?
No. I was just agreeing with what you said, man. Sometimes you just have to let it go. If it fed your soul, there you go. We're good.
And that's what I love about jazz, for sure. But it's what I love about what I do, and it's what I love about music. And I'm really vibing right now on your story about Nancy saying, you know, I'm a singer. If someone's jazz, I'll give them jazz. If someone's R&B, I'll give them R&B. That's where I landed right now. You know, once upon a time, I would have said I'm a singer, but I do opera.
Yeah,
but I've got all this voice. I do oratorio. But now, you want to hear me sing a little jazz too? I can do that too, and I'm happy to.
There you go.
That doesn't mean I can't do something else.
Because that's what Miles Davis's whole thing, man. You know, when you get into the latter part of Miles, of course, we all know he was one of the innovators of, especially the cool groove, the cool jazz groove. But then the establishment of jazz as the legitimacy of jazz during that era. Miles Davis undoubtedly is one of the pioneers. But then Miles in his own right said, I can't just stay here, you know? Okay, yeah, I've done jazz, but him and Nancy Wilson were basically saying and doing the same thing. their whole vibe was, Miles started going with Marcus Miller. He started, he wanted to collaborate with Jimi Hendrix. And after right out of Durham, North Carolina, there's a legend by the name of Betty Davis. Not the Betty Davis, from the black and white movies, but Betty Davis, who's the mother of funk. Okay, who's the one that introduced Miles Davis to Jimi Hendrix, and then you started seeing Miles Davis's fashion change. You started seeing him grow his afro, and then even his musical expression started to evolve into the. So that's Of course, we have to, for the jazz sticklers, who respectfully, the purist. I respect your purity of thought of jazz. I really do, because that is a language in its own. But also to tag on that, there are chord structures. There is a theory of jazz that is exclusively jazz. There's no doubt about that. We get into that. But if we're talking about the artistic side of expressing yourself, man, that's what Miles, one of the fathers of jazz, was talking about, and Nancy Wilson. So evolve, the evolution.
There are some dynamite musicians I've worked with here in Richmond or wherever, and I'm sure you have the same. Wayne Vaughn is one.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that later. But there are musicians I've worked with who just seem to be able to do anything that they want. Some guys in town who I really respect are musicians, sure. I've heard them play a lot of jazz, but I've heard them play this stuff too, and their approach is always very creative and artistic, and it's full of talent. But then you also see the great skill, developed, practiced, honed, intellectual skill that they've added to that raw talent, and I think there's something beautiful about that. There's also something beautiful from the musician or the artist that had to teach themselves because they didn't have access to a great education on what to do, and that's also gorgeous and should be celebrated the same way. And I'm excited that my first guest in the show, Valerie Giselle Oliver, takes on that challenge head on and head first, and I'm excited to be a part of works like that as we can. Vic,
right on, Valerie.
We got a few more minutes. I want to talk about a couple more things. Before we do, would you mind blessing us with a little right down there at the beach?
Oh man, that would talk about and Marvin Gaye was another one, man. His brother Frankie and I, Frankie Gaye, before he passed, I remember Frankie talking about how he and Marvin, because as a lot of us know, the song "What's Going On" was, Marvin wrote that when Frankie came back from Vietnam. I remember Frankie telling me, he said, "Vic, man, when I came home, it was I was straight out of Nam. Of course, the PTSD, he wasn't diagnosed with PTSD, but just the vibe of coming back home, acclimating to society, and then seeing how his own, back home, there were people that hated him and some that loved him as well, because of the involvement as a soldier that they didn't ask to be in the first place." But he said, man, I remember Marvin and I, because he said when he came back, he had to move in the room with Marvin, and he said Marvin and he would stay up till like the sun came up, because Marvin was just saturated with wanting to know what it was like. Tell me the story of Vietnam. And I'll tell you the stories of what's happened here in the U.S. while you were over there. And those late night talks that Frankie told me about was the foundation, of course, for what's going on. And then, how Marvin's love for jazz. Marvin wanted to be the Black Frank Sinatra, really. And he tried to he did a few albums of standards, I think it was I know one main album of standards, of jazz standards, pop standards, with that lush orchestration feel and what have you. Once again, a note to the evolution of an artist. But that song, and hearing Frankie talking about how, just as an artist and the power of art, the power of music, the power of a song will last forever, man. And I don't know, maybe Mother, Mother, There's too many of you crying. Brother, brother, brother. There's far too many of you dying. You know we gotta find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, picket lines, picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Come on, talk to me so we can see. Whoa, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. Oh, yeah. Ooh. Yeah, man. I expect a tear on your show, brother, but that's heavy for today.
That's absolutely heavy.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, cousin, it's your voice. I've talked about you a lot around here.
Yeah.
So, for those of you who are just meeting Victor Brook, there in Los Angeles, California, chilling at the beach, look for him coming up in the if we can, find a way to get him on an airplane and open this museum. We've got something special coming next year, and Vic is on that live. I'm hoping you got here and you show us something we've never seen before. Experience, lively situation going on. Some whatever it is you want to bring us, we want that good fun.
It'll be an honor, man, an honor. I'm so proud of what you and the museum is doing there, man. That's just, it just goes to show another reason why Richmond is just deep to me, man. Just so many good memories of that town and the artistry in Richmond. Oh my God. Man, a lot of people, like back in the 80s, I remember going to little cutaways, man, and we, Alliston and I we would hear acoustic musicians out of Richmond, and oh, come on, man, it was, pop, folk, soul, you got funk out of Richmond. I mean, it was just, Richmond's just dripping with artistry, man. Much respect to that area.
I was saying in an interview I conducted for a different thing, I was saying Richmond is not necessarily always thought of because of our art. To me, my mission, in part, to introduce Richmond, Virginia to the world, maybe that has not yet grappled with us, engaged with us. And that's not to say I'm not going to be some sort of hero for the city, but there are people in Los Angeles, your audience maybe isn't aware of what's coming out of Richmond or up.
Oh yeah.
I'm hoping to get Zay on one of these calls and talk to him about Latin jazz and music coming out of America.
Oh yeah, let's set that up, man. That would be fantastic. Yeah, let's definitely do that.
I'm hoping to get Wayne and Wanda and Wyann
about
music. I mean, people who are Earth, Wind, and Fire, the emotions that they are part of this situation, especially just had really get
right.
From you, people like you and people who I love dearly, like Wayne and Wanda. I think it's important and incredible, and I feel blessed.
Gotcha.
An archive this city.
Hey, man, just the blessing of being able to deliver something to yourself and to the world through art. I couldn't explain it any other way, man. You as an artist know what I'm saying, and all the artists watching, you know what I'm saying. It's a blessing, man. It's a positive for the soul to be able to speak for those who may not be able to have, what I'm saying, that you're able to, you're a mouthpiece, you're a vessel for those who may not be able to artistically put it together or have something to say. That's why I tell create artists, y'all create, man. Just no matter what it is. Nikki Giovanni wrote poems and writing poems, and and the last poets out of, the Watts poets out of here, and those protest poets, y'all pick those up. Listen to that stuff. That was pre-Gil Scott-Heron with the, the revolution will not be televised. That his power anthem that came out. But even before him, you had the last poets, the Watts poets. Y'all check those lyrics out and that realism that was coming out through artistry that we needed at that time, because if it wasn't for the words of those poets, those protest poets, man, these Watts riots and Detroit riots, DC riots would have been even worse on this U.S. So it spoke a language of healing. It spoke a language that says, yeah, we're upset. We don't know what's happening out here, in that time, just like our youngsters today. That's why I'm like, yo, write those poems, say what you got to say. And man, thank you so much for your platform on this, because that allows even more of a message of artistry and positivity that we can have. Thank you, brother.
Family, thank you, and I'll take that back in, and I'm thankful and happy to share these things, right? And as we're coming to an end of the program, I mentioned we have on the VMFA Koinge together. And Koinge is a word that means together. Koinge workshop out of New York, a collection of Black photographers just taking and a lot more to it than the very deep concept. But they were working together. The Koinge workshop still exists different than it did when it originally. But coming up, we're going to be having us happening in a way that I've we'll have discussions, talks, and lectures on the Koinge workshop. And
okay,
the show is an entire wall dedicated to music and musicians. Louis Draper, one of the founders of the workshop,
okay,
inspired by Miles Davis, who you brought up earlier. And so that season finale of this audience likely going to happen in that gallery space. And that night, Mama's going to sing.
Oh, wow, right on. Right on. Oh, man, I let her, man. Grew up watching and listening to her. And, fantastic, man. Fantastic. That's great.
The audience all know Mom very well. Spiritual concert she just did, gallery open, her all over. She's coming back to sing with us some more. Join her.
Oh, wow, man. Right on. Right on. That's good.
Well, Vic, I appreciate the conversation. Family, and I hope to see your face tonight. Audience, we found on a whole spectrum of emotion. After tears, that ride right along. I'm going to experience the people I love, the topics that we love together. Up next is something special. After my chat with Brook, check that out. If you Google it, look it up, YouTube, and get on board with that positivity. Coming up next, following Victor right here, is one Victor LeGrand Brooks Sr. and his wife, Vic's mother, Sandra. We call her Snoopy. They're going to be on. We're going to look a little bit deeper into the discussion we're having right now. Hear some of the stories that come directly out of Ellington's orchestra with Uncle Norris. Uncle Victor's one of his great friends we've talked about today. Little Richard. At the end of this series, we'll have an entire dedicated to the music of Nina Simone, who my heart very heavily Stay tuned for more discussion. Family, if I were there, I'd give you a big squeeze. I can't wait until I can fly out there and experience more life and love.
Oh, yeah, man. Me too, brother. You got your good home. LA ain't the same without you, man. We out here waiting on you. And I got to give a shout out to what I consider some of Richmond's finest, man. And that Plunky Come on, Plunky, man. Plunky and the Wonders of Juju. We talking about Bird Park. I'm going back, and Plunky's still funky today. Bertani Artillery, one of the most incredible singers out of Richmond as well. Oh, man, just, you know, much love. And Sean Fatman Owens, producer out there from the New Jack Swing and Teddy Riley area of Virginia Way. All of that good, incredible game-changing music and artistry, man.
Plunky
Thank
just
you.
did a show not long ago outside.
Oh, yeah?
I think I was hey, if Julie is in town now, I might be catching up with Julie coming up in a day or so.
Right on, man.
All
Right
right,
on, buddy.
all right, cousin, we gotta wrap this up. I gotta let my audience go.
Okay, man, I love you and much respect, man. Thank you again for inviting me. I sure appreciate it. Much love and happiness to all of your audience, man.
All the love. I'm glad we
Much love and happiness.
give Cheryl my love and Vic and Benjamin as well.
I will.
And so,
I will.
I say, audience, continue to love. Thank you for loving with us tonight. From Richmond, Virginia, at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, this has been the Dominion Energy Virtual Jazz Cafe. I'm Robert Phanord. Good night.